Today marks the third and final day of our conference, and we are delighted on the turnout that we've had. It's more than we could have imagined. We hopefully are looking for your feedback. We want to find out what worked, the areas that you want to see us expand on. We're delighted in wanting to hear how you've networked over the few days that we've been here with the breakout sessions, in your breakout upstairs, and in the times that we've allowed for the breaks. Please remember to use the AFITC2017@gmail.com so that you can also share with us for your recommendations for the future. I do want to mention that over the last few days we've heard some phenomenal speakers, and today will be no exception. We're looking forward to that. We know yesterday General Schwedo talked with us, and General Raymond had kicked off the first day with their vision and appreciation of knowing where we're headed with our Cyberpower, and their insight was impactful to us. Chief Wright, of course, came in and talked with us about resiliency, that being paramount and the cornerstone of how we care for our airmen, and that's big A airmen. That's our military and our civilian force and the industry forces. And then our panels, the IT exec, the cloud panel, and the functional CIO panels, the engagement that we had, the questions that you had, and I want to let you know to please keep your questions coming. We have gotten permission to continue to send questions that maybe you had on your mind at the time or you sent in and they didn't get answered. We want to relay those back to those respective leaders so that they can still answer those, and we'll be glad to post those along with the slide deck, if they had a slide deck, but we will be getting that out to you so we can continue to have that dialogue with you beyond today. I just have a few minutes to encapsulate, how powerful things were. We had Lieutenant General Bunch with the acquisition flavor, Major General Wegman yesterday. You missed a treat with that. We've had the Amazon partners, we have IBM. Today we have Lieutenant General Jamieson will be on in just a minute. She's our first keynote. We have Mr. Keene from Microsoft. That will be really good. And we have Ms. Michelle Losalis that will be with us today. And I do want to mention, if you didn't join us for some of the breakouts, some of the most powerful ones we had Major General Kreider here yesterday talking about her new role as a CDO and wanting to solicit your input so that she can take a look and model and see where we need to go from here and taking the Air Force forward. So to change gears a little bit, as you know, this year we brought it up on the first day that the Air Force partnered with the AFCEA Montgomery chapter and the Montgomery Chamber of Commerce to bring what we call the Smart City, Smart Base concept to life, and what we have coined as the Innovate AFITC Cyber Challenge. And here to announce the winner for this year's competition is the Air Force Deputy CIO, Mr. Bill Marion.
Thanks, Marcy. This was a first ever event, and I want to applaud the Chamber, applaud the BES, applaud AU for putting this together. This is the wave of the future. I asked a question yesterday on the functional CIO panel of who supports Hack the Air Force type events, and it was unanimous that this is the kind of activity that we have to do. We have to get different views and different perspectives to come in and look at our systems, because cybersecurity is just that important. And then with that, the whole idea of smart basing and smart concepts on how do we not just become more efficient in our electrical usage and those kind of things, but also how do we secure this new world ecosystem when you think of IoT, IoT attacks and those kind of things. So with no further ado, I would like to first announce actually the team that had the best presentation. It was the Wetumpka STEAM folks. I think they're here today. It was a group of high schoolers, which was awesome because those are the young men and women that are going to be the future of the United States Air Force and our industry base. So if you wouldn't mind standing up, I think they're here with us today. If you could give them a round of applause. So I got to judge one of these, and it was a senior airman at max. They were airmen. I didn't ask whether they were one or a three striper or no striper, but I was just thinking, you know, I'm not sure when I was at GS7 if I could have gone up and presented a smart basing concept to some 2- and 3-star equivalents in industry executive vice presidents, and they did a phenomenal job, and so congratulations on that. The winners for this year focused in a really interesting way, and it was really, I think, a core challenge in the Air Force is how do you globally share, or even in ecosystems, share data much more across the board, almost like a Yelp, right? So we have content and training. We have all kinds of content inside the Air Force. We have data everywhere. We don't necessarily have information. And so one of the concepts was around using like Yelp-type concepts to grade training, grade coursework, grade information sharing sites to provide more focus on where the information lies in our ecosystem. So with no further ado, let me see here. I'm getting blind here, so I apologize. Do we have a drum roll? All right. Is Innovate MGM. So the team members we have today is Mr. Stacy Waldrop with eSolutions Architect. You can come on up, please. Mr. Chris Diggs with eSolutions Architects. Mr. Sham Anamachi. Oh, pretty close. Major Justin Ruhol and Lee Sumner. And that is a combination of U.S. Army Air Command and Staff students, NTT Data, eSolution Architects. And so with that, we actually have something better than the Mayweather Connor. So, the prize fighters of cybersecurity and smart basing. And one last plug for the the industry session this afternoon at 2 o'clock. That's an open industry session to kind of talk through just open dialogue with industry on some of the key things and for you to ask questions for the A6 community. So I'd encourage all the industry base to join us at 2 today.
Thank you, Mr. Marion. At this time, I would like to introduce our first keynote speaker, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance, Headquarters, United States Air Force, Lieutenant General VeraLinn Jamieson. Lieutenant General Jamieson is the Air Force's Senior Intelligence Officer directly responsible to the Director of National Intelligence and under the Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. She leads 5 directorates and supports 30,000 personnel enterprise with a portfolio valued at $55 billion. Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant General Jamieson.
While we are in football-crazed mania, we all know the Mountaineers are going to take, and it doesn't matter what happens here in Alabama. Let's get you all energized and started up. You know, it's always an exciting time slot when you follow the heightened announcement of the winners of competition, of which this entire conference is based. So I'm really grateful to my partner in the A6 for giving me this time slot. But in all reality, I am honored to be here, and I want to say thank you very much for inviting me to speak with you all today. And I'd rather say for inviting me to have a conversation with all of you today. Having witnessed the last couple days, the excitement, the energy, and the enthusiasm that has surrounded this conference, it's a fantastic opportunity for us to really get out our ideas of what cyberpower is all about, what data really means, how do we translate that into information, and what do we actually do with it once we have it. So I really am excited to take advantage of a few minutes to start and ignite a conversation. I also watched the news this morning, and I think that we do have to just, in our excitement and energy, you know, just take a pause and see what's happening with our natural disaster that's actually hitting us here in Alabama today, but our Texans have been under for days on end with over 50 inches of rain hitting Houston. And what has happened with tornadoes and the storm that has spawned into Louisiana, and as it passes through the South and up to the Mid-Atlantic. And why I bring it up isn't just so that we support and assist those who are in this horrific storm's path, but it also is a living example of how we are harnessing data, how we are living in the digital age, and the lessons that we are employing today on how we proactively anticipate and act to actually save lives and increase awareness of folks in preparation and action during this storm. So I think that it's also really timely that this is happening while we're here discussing and innovating our ideas with data and cyber. I also think, wow, what a conflicts of time we've got right now. Everybody knows we're at the end of August, and at the end of August, it means September's the next month. And what's significant about September? Every year, Apple releases some kind of new product. And what they do throughout the entire summer is they get the buzz going on what's going to happen and what's going to come out from Apple. And we all have seen the commercials, whether they be on blogs and Twitter, on sites, or on the news, that you can buy an iOS 7 phone right now and get one free. They're dumping today's product so that they create excitement for early adapters to want tomorrow's project. Not just are they going to sell us products, they are innovatively stimulating us by putting out messages that only Apple can do. They're going to hologram in Steve Jobs to announce the new product. And you kind of go, okay, they're hologramming in Steve Jobs. We all know that tragically he fell to cancer, and he's moved on to a non-physical state. How amazing is that we have one of our global corporations able to harness the not physical world to bring in Steve Jobs to announce a product. I mean, the buzz that they are generating is phenomenal. And I liken that to the buzz that you all have generated about the Air Force. That's the electricity that we're feeling right now and that we've felt for the past 3 days. And so I just want us to take a moment to look at the Air Force buzz that we're generating through the ideas and the conversations via the panels and the speeches and the networking that's taken place. And I want to charge you to continue to be those champions and take it to the field and continue the buzz and empower your ideas and ignite the buzz so that it really becomes a roar out in the field on where the Air Force is going with relationship with industry, what it's doing in cyberspace, and how it is harnessing technology and using, not just using data, but using human-machine learning, human-machine teaming to create future technological advances that probably lead to artificial intelligence integration into our profession of arms. So that's what I want to have in our conversation this morning. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a few challenges and a few opportunities. For those of you who do not have the opportunity that we all have in the front row to sit in briefings with Chief of Staff Goldfein, he always talks about when we have challenges, there are always opportunities. And when there are challenges and opportunities, there are examples of airmen putting things into practice today. We just have to call them out, realize, take those lessons learned, and apply them to our own situation or our own fields. So I'm going to present you some challenges, some opportunities, and some vignettes that hopefully will give you some tools in your kit bag that you can relate to, but more importantly, continue to inspire you to be champions of the Air Force buzz when you go back so that you can ignite the field and keep this energy going. Because we're probably going to see a dip with Apple's release. And when Apple releases something, we're going to see Samsung's release. And we're going to see the next spiral of technology. And we can sometimes get lost in all that. And I say it's up to us to ensure that we harness this for the Air Force use. And we partner with industry to show them that the profession of arms is not locked in the industrial era, but we are firmly living in the digital age, in the digital era. And with living in the digital era, we have many different challenges. And we have different generations. And we have generations of young airmen. And all they have known is living in the digital era. They have grown up since birth, and we've all heard it, but it bears repeating. They have grown up since birth digitally connected, whether it be with a smartphone, some kind of pad device to see what crowds are up to, what social media is contacting, GPS to get them to their destination fastest, apps of all sorts to garner data for them to process information to achieve whatever they want to achieve. They understand it, they live with it, and they embrace human-machine teaming. Then we have us, the senior old dinosaurs. And we're all, whether we want to admit it or not, we are adapters. We are late adapters because we were primarily in our 20s and early 30s when the digital era came about. And while we grab onto and we use technology and we embrace the idea of integrating and partnering with technology, whether we want to face it or not, our ideas are manifested in industrial management. And so we encourage it, but it's not akin to us. And then you have the middle layer. The middle layer is most of all of you. Some of you are on the cusp of always growing up in the digital era, and some of you were part of the early adapters because you were in elementary school when it came out. And what is on your shoulders is the responsibility to talk about human-machine teaming, human-machine learning. Because while the young airmen have this ingrained in their culture, they don't believe that they are empowered to innovate. And the middle generations, you all understand it, but you don't believe you're empowered to lead and that you're empowered to inspire our young airmen to actually try to innovate. You also have the responsibility, very heavy responsibility, to demonstrate the value of human-machine teaming and human-machine learning within the profession of arms. And that is partnering with industry in a way that we have never done before. So those are some of our challenges. But with our challenges, we kind of go, I'm Intel, so I look at what is our adversary doing? And how is our adversary reacting to this digital era? And how do we maintain our asymmetric advantage, which we acknowledge is somewhat slipping away, because technology is advancing across the globe? What are they doing? And how are they reacting? So let's take a look at our adversaries. They actually are innovating at the same pace in certain areas as us, and they've outstripped us in other areas. They are using the same global corporations because while we like to think that they're American companies, we all know they're global companies, and different countries are using their capabilities to their own national security advantage and their own economic advantage. We've seen white papers written by both China and Russia on how they want to use human-machine learning to advance artificial intelligence to ignite their economies and defend their cultures and way of life, just like we have. And we've seen some differences in how our adversaries are utilizing technology. And I'm going to concentrate on China for a second. We know we have the top 5 industries today. We have, and you've heard from, we have Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, and Google. And you've heard from many of these, and you will hear from more. So what has China done? China has taken some intellectual property from our global corporations, and they've decided that with 3 billion people, they want to create their own. So they have. They have Weibo, WeChat, Snow, Beidou, their own Facebook, their own Twitter, their own Snapchat, their own Instagram. And they've mandated to their culture, you're going to use our Chinese capabilities. And they've done this because they understand the power of harnessing data from 3 billion people and understanding what that data turns into information on cultural trends, intent of the human, what are their interests and how are they motivated. And so they're getting their data and using their systems. Well, we can take advantage of that because as we look to how do we go forward, how do we take what industry has coined as the 3 V's, the volume, the velocity, and the variety of data, and use that for our means? We do that by saying, in our own lens, how do we actually access this data? How do we harness it and turn it into something that I can actually use? And I think you've heard from our CDO, Kim Kreider, Chief Data Officer, one of the ways the Air Force is moving out. And why did we actually brainstorm and look at hiring a Chief Data Officer, which is very different from a Chief Information Officer? We hired a Chief Data Officer to be what I call in very simple terms, to be the enforcer, to ensure that we actually create data and adhere to data standards and open mission architecture and open mission systems. And why the Air Force is doing that is so that we are not overwhelmed by the speed and scale of the 3 V's of data today, which at times today we are. If you have an open mission system and you have data standards, you then are able to structure the data. If you are able to structure the data, you're able to access the data. If you're able to access the data, then you can move on from an elementary application to a more complex application. You can then move to, once you have access, data confidence, data security, data transport. And we must do this because we want to take that data and we want to ensure that our decision makers at the strategic, operational, and tactical level actually receive the right data at the right time, intact, to shape the outcome that we desire in the physical or geopolitical space. So from an ISR perspective, the chief and the secretary have charged me and the ISR community to get on to the next generation of ISR dominance. So I'm going to give you some vignettes and some challenges and opportunities that we face on everything that I've talked about in the digital era as we evaluate what our adversary is doing. So next generation of ISR dominance. You know, that sounds a bit daunting. And you might ask yourselves, why do we actually have to have a next generation of ISR dominance? And I will tell you it's very simple. Today, how we have enacted the ISR enterprise, we have thrown manpower, limited resources, some training, but mostly manpower at our issue. And we've been creating our enterprise as we've been employing our enterprise. And our answer has been POM for more ISR professionals so that they can conduct processing, exploitation, they can disseminate. so that they can integrate collection capability, so that they can inform warfighters on what capabilities exist in the enterprise based on what platforms are out there, what sensors are out there. And we've thought we've been innovative, and we've said we have traditional and non-traditional ISR. But all we have done is thrown manpower, really, at the problem. That's not sustainable. We can't just continue to throw manpower, because the 21st century digital age is about speed and scale, volume, variety, and velocity of data. And the human brain cannot process at the speed of the 21st century. It's not sustainable for us to throw manpower. It's not sustainable that we just throw widgets and more platforms and more sensors at the problem. We actually have to look at how do we human-machine team so that the machines or the computers can actually compute at speed and scale and allow us to get back to the heart of what we do, which is analysis, decision advantage, and provide that to the decision maker. So, next generation ISR dominance doesn't, at first we thought, man, this sounds really expensive. But it's really not. It's right in front of us. We have to look at things differently in the digital age. Last week, I was at AMC. I talked to an A1C who's been in the Air Force less than 2 years. He was charged with a mission, air mobility mission, to take a look and evaluate the security and the feasibility of operations based on the threat if Air Mobility Command is tasked to support operations to defeat ISIS in the Philippines. I bring up the Philippines because it is not one of our adversaries we talk about all the time: Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. Yet it is the mission that he has at hand. So he goes into the DoD exquisite ISR enterprise to see what he can find. And he does that for about an hour. And he says, I have to use publicly available information to actually execute my mission. Not only do I have to use publicly available information, we all know that's social media, videos, tweets, blogs. I have to research using publicly available information, and I have to do it not just at work, I have to do it at home, because the sites that I'm going to use I can't access from my work center, because I have tons of, I will call it somewhat antiquated intelligence systems that operate on SIPR and JWICs, but that's not helping me get at publicly available information. So he goes and he uses DataMiner, Babel Street, FlightAware, EchoSet, YouTube, and he puts together intelligence preparation of the battle space, of the environment, to demonstrate what's the force protection vulnerability. What is the local populace sentiment of U.S. operations in the Philippines? What are the airfield security vulnerabilities, and where is it safe? And where would the adversary take advantage and launch some kind of attack operation against our vulnerable aircraft? And he does this 100% in a very timely manner, completely using publicly available information. And he briefs up his air crews so that they are aware, if called, on what the situation is for several airfields in the Philippines. And I go, we must embrace human-machine teaming, because our first foundation of knowledge includes publicly available information, to which we, inside of the ISR enterprise, have not included in our foundational platforms. Not only have we not included, we've made it very hard for our ISR airmen to actually access that data at speed and scale that they need to actually provide decision advantage to those who are going to operate. So we're going to change our ISR enterprise. And we're going to go forward with the CDO, creating an open mission standard, UCI compliant, and in putting in, partnering with industry, tools that allow us to access the data, secure the data, transport the data across multiple security domains in a reliable and expeditious manner. Now, I want to give you another example of, does this human-machine teaming mean that we're just going to abdicate and relinquish control of our decision-making? Because those of us who are a little older and not embedded in the digital era have apprehensions and anxiety of what algorithms turning into human-machine learning script, turning into artificial intelligence can lead to. And I will tell you, when we started in the ISR enterprise with our distributed ground station with FMV, and our airmen partnered with our RPA enterprise, executing operations, we did not discuss second and third order effects and what resiliency measures were required to actually anticipate and thwart some of those consequences that our airmen endured watching the video day after day, week after week, year after year, as we've expanded to operating over 90 caps. So as we look at human-machine teaming, let's have conversations now. Let's talk about the anxiety that many people have about teaming with a machine, because we are not going to relinquish control to the machine. We're going to partner with the machine. We're going to do this because we're going to work with technology. We're not just simply going to use technology. We're going to wield the data so that the data works for us and we turn it into information so that we're not overwhelmed by the variety, velocity, and volume of data. So in our conversations about human-machine teaming, I'll give you something that we're doing in the ISR enterprise right now that kind of gets at, how do we address anxiety? How do we incentivize teaming and partnering with machines to create our understanding that we are working with the technology, not simply using the technology? And many of you may have heard of Project Maven. Former Deputy Secretary of Defense Work also coined the phrase algorithmic warfare. And let me tell you a little bit about what it is and how we in the Air Force are preparing to use this. Project Maven. Project Maven is about taking full motion video and actually getting an algorithm so that the computer can actually identify objects. Because from those 15 years of our airmen staring at the screen, we didn't ask them to be able to structure and use the data later. We just asked them to catalog and characterize the objects they were seeing at that time. What that caused was our inability to actually utilize about 90% of our FMV. What do I mean by that? 1 second of full motion video equates to roughly 2,000 pages of written message traffic reports and texts. So 1 second equates to over 2,000 pages of reports of message traffics and texts. The human brain cannot process that amount of data. So what we asked our FMV analysts to do was characterize what they saw. So Project Maven is about using some off-the-shelf software to characterize the objects on the FMV. Well, in order to do that, you have to actually data tag the image. Very tedious, very much what we had asked the airmen to do, but with a twist to store that so that it could be retrieved and it could be used to import into the computer so the computer could learn from a human tag data on what structures are so that it could learn and automate. So only young, empowered wing commanders, group commanders, and squadron commanders who believed in human-machine teaming, who believed in the innovation of their young airmen, took the data that we used to classify, scrubbed it, unclassified it, and released it to the young airmen. The young airmen said, I see the value of spending my time data tagging in this manner because A, you're going to incentivize me with some memes, and I like that. I like to get memes, and I like to have on display how many memes I get. But more importantly, you're incentivizing me to data tag the information today so that tomorrow I gain back time and space so that I can partner with my machine that's telling me what the object is so that I can sit back and do the analysis of what are the anomalies, what are the patterns of life, what do I see that needs to be inspected on more. And that data is structured so I can layer that data and I can visualize more and more data in a more comprehensible manner. And when we explained all that, when all that was explained to me, I should say, from our young airmen, I was like, go for it and do it. So Project Maven is just starting with full motion video because of the daunting challenge of 1 second of video equaling 2,000 pages of message traffic reports and texts. And the volume, variety, and velocity of data that is coming at us will become manageable because the computers will do what computers do best. And then humans will be able to have time and space to do what they do best. It isn't that we're relinquishing control. It is that we are teaming and partnering in a manner to create decision advantage. Young airmen today are hungering for our leaders to give them developmental operation environments. They are looking for us to encourage them to think and act. And more importantly, they are wanting to believe we want them to do this. You in the middle arena are hungering to be empowered because we have checklisted you to death through instruction, through guidance, and through mandate. We need to free that. The Secretary has made the elimination and reduction of AFIs principal and foremost in what we do, so that you don't beg for more guidance. You actually beg for forgiveness because what you have innovated is not illegal, is not immoral, and is not unethical. And you've been freed to act. And you're teaming with the machine, so you are wielding the data for use to turn it into information, not drowning in unstructured data that you can't access, that you can't secure, that you can't transport, that does you no good. So I'd like to continue this conversation by telling you, be bold. Shatter the paradigms that exist today. Continue to ignite the buzz that you all have started and had with ideas here at this conference. And I look forward to hearing what buzz you've had from previous panels and upcoming panels and where you think we need to go as we look to human-machine teaming via human-machine learning and possibly linked to artificial intelligence integrated into the profession of arms. So with that, what are your ideas? And let's continue the conversation. That would be, from up above, someone is going to give us the God answer.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we'll be taking questions. If you have a question for Lieutenant General Jamieson, please email afitc2017@gmail.com. Captain Granger, please go ahead and ask the first question.
Ma'am, in your estimation, what is the greatest challenge to providing ISR support to the Joint Concept for Access and Maneuver in the Global Commons in the Pacific Area of Operation?
Well, that's an easy question. It's a great conversation starter that's going to continue this buzz the Air Force is generating. So, I really believe that it doesn't matter what AOR you're in. Our mission, I'm a simple person. Let's boil it down. Our mission in the Air Force is to fly, fight, and win. Whether we're doing that through the cyber domain, through the space domain, through the air domain, we have sensors on the ground and subsurface. What do we need to do? We need to be enforced by Major General Kreider to write our requirements that allow us to have data standards and open mission architectures so that when we plug in, we can actually repeat and integrate future technologies. How are we harnessing this for the Pacific is no different from how we're harnessing this right now in CENTCOM or in EUCOM. So one of our examples of the earliest tippers that Russia was invading Crimea was social media. We also have to free ourselves from the old industrial paradigm that DoD exquisite ISR is the answer. And we have to free ourselves and say, the data is out there. I need to harness it and use it and turn it into information, secure it, transport it, and get it to the decision maker at the speed and scale of today in a manner that allows us decision advantage and an outcome that we have shaped in a time and space of our choosing.
Next question, please.
Ma'am, to what extent can
It is
cognitive
freaky.
AI, such as IBM Watson, automate our data mining of intelligence to speed up analysis before the human element is required to act or decide now and in the future?
I got to tell you, that is freaky. Even though I saw Arnie Bunch and he talked about the voice, the female voice coming up from above, not seeing anyone gesture, make eye contact or anything is a bit freaky. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. So I'm going to look at you every time she talks. So we talk about IBM and we talk about Watson because we've all heard about it. But I have to tell you, the data-driven culture that the top 5 industries have instantiated is not just in those corporations. When we look at our defense industries, we see a data-driven culture ignited there. I went to GE 2 weeks ago, and they talked about the mental switch they made about going from a product-oriented organization to a data-driven organization. And I'm going to tie this into Watson and where we're going. And the reason they are going, and they started this in 2012. 2012 was when they realized their stock was down and that they had to get into the environment of today, the digital era, and they had to make some decisions about how they were going to join a data-driven culture. And it was top-down mandated, 2012. It said it took them about 2 years to get more than 50% to buy in. So we're at 2014. 2014 to 2017, they are still constantly talking and looking at how data is driving their culture. And an example that they used is what data can provide you in a data-driven culture is the better use of information versus the drowning in unstructured data. And this is really what IBM and Watson is trying to demonstrate to us. What they were able to identify on their power plants, whether it be an engine or a physical plant, was the ability to put sensors in critical areas so that they could get information from their products real time that the computer could then calculate and anticipate because it could correlate all the data and display the data so that their engineers could then determine proactively, how do I streamline my depot maintenance, if you will, so that I maintain steady application of my power plants, whether they be aircraft engines or physical plants. Because I can anticipate, based on the data from the sensors, where the critical vulnerabilities actually are. And I could never have seen that or anticipate that without the fusing of the macro data sets that the computer was able to cull through. IBM has done the same thing with Watson. And Watson, that we read about a few years ago, is not IBM Watson today. What IBM of yesteryear did was what you all are cyber experts, understand were human-enabled bots that went out and did an active action and then terminated. They didn't learn from their action. It was just an executed bot. What is about today and what IBM is doing today and what we are partnering with industry to do today is our machines are now learning from the data that they are executing because they have structured the data to ingest feedback and then compare it to what they originated with. And the algorithm is learning, machine learning. And we are teaming with the machine to then assess what are those anomalies, what are those tippers at speed and scale that we could not have ingested and analyzed before. That's what IBM Watson, that is what data-driven industries are using to change their culture, to take and wield the use of what data can give you versus being overwhelmed with the amount of data.
We have time for one more question.
Ma'am, what advice would you give us in fighting a system that does not seem to want to hear innovative ideas, that seems to prefer the status quo?
Thank you, Sarah. So I'd start with this. We do need to look at history, and we do need to learn from history to shatter the thoughts that paralyze us today. And we've all read about how we were an agricultural country, and everybody was a farmer. And then we went into the industrial age. And yes, there were those that feared what the production line would do. And I don't know if you all have read, I would highly suggest you to take a look at General McChrystal's book on Team of Teams, because he outlines the transition from agricultural to industrial age and how with discussion, dialogue, and enthusiasm, management styles changed. And what we went to was expertise, what we call today SMEs, in a niche area to actually get greater efficiency so that you could have a greater net profit. And the military and everyone adopted that kind of managerial style. Well, in the book, he says we are now in the digital era. That style didn't work in the 1800s with agricultural culture, but it did work in the industrial age with an industrial culture. But we're not in the industrial age. We're in the digital era. So that management style isn't going to work tomorrow. It's not working today. Volume, velocity, and variety is overwhelming us. We can either choose to ignore the empowerment and the innovation that will allow us to partner and pair with technology, or we can allow our adversaries to take advantage of that, continue to decline and lose our asymmetric advantage, and be reactive to our adversaries' ops tempo, because they are also adapting to the digital era. So I would leave you with the simple challenge of every generation has to decide, am I 1 foot forward or am I 2 steps back? And we're at that time. The reason I talked about GE isn't just because I went there. It's an example. We are not behind everyone else, like a lot of the news would like us to believe. GE, a top Fortune 500 company, in 2012 made the decision to be a data-driven company. While the top 5 data-driven cultures made that decision years before. 2012. 2017, they've said we're still not there. It's a continual work at being innovative and empowering and teaming. We are not that far behind, but we will be if we don't look to the future and say, how am I going to utilize the information by teaming with machines and working with algorithms to harness the data in a mass, use it so that I can visualize, display, and get decision advantage to our warfighters at a time and space of our choosing to out-decision cycle our adversary. We can choose that, or we can choose not that. And we all know what not means. It means we are going to economically, militarily, informationally, and diplomatically lose our status in the world. And the best thing about being in the United States Air Force is that's not our culture. Our culture is to rise to the occasion when we are in it. We have examples from the Manhattan Project. We have examples of ingenuity with our cyber age. We are going to do this. That's what this buzz is all about. That's why we're having these conferences, so that you can be champions of the buzz and go out and ignite the field to demonstrate to them that we have DevOps environments, that we are willing to try and try again. Some people call that failure. I just say we're going to try and try again. And we reward that, and we incentivize that, because when we harness our innovation, there's nothing that's going to stop us. I'm excited to hear some of our presentations later this morning. I'm excited to talk to some of you. But what I'm excited most about is for you to hear you all in the field continuing the Air Force buzz and where we're going in the future. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant General Jamieson.